church environment. And I'm really excited. I've heard his presentation once. He's going to adapt it a little bit to our audience, but he's going to help us as we graduate to be in the world, but not of the world. And he's actually here on assignment to the church schools by President Oaks. So we'll be privileged to have him come in and join us next week. And then we have lots of others after that. But let's go ahead and get started. Karen, would you offer a word of prayer, please? And
our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be able to meet together as students and faculty. We're grateful for the experience we have here at BYU and learning and developing our abilities to serve and to better the world. We are grateful for Dr. Graham and his membership and leadership in teaching in our department, and pray that bless him as he speaks to us today. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Karen and Dr. Graham have done a lot of work together and have even published together. So wonderful. Who are our two moderators today? Do you know?
Ben and I.
You know who you are, moderators.
It's Melanie and Dallin.
Awesome. Okay, Melanie, Dallin. Where's Dallin?
So who says for every week for the rest of the semester?
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll now turn the time over to our own friend and distinguished professor. And those of you that are new to the department may not know that he is also the most published professor on campus, well, top two anyway, most published and cited faculty members here at BYU. He's amazing, and he's coming to us off of a Fulbright assignment, and we're looking forward to hearing a lot about his work in Columbia. Dr. Graham, time's yours. I guess you're working on technology here. We are, after all, the instructional psychology and technology department, so we should be working on technology.
They call the psychology part is mine, it's the technology part.
Studied the psychology.
If we did like do we still have the same assignments like a dissertation?
Thank you. And for those of you that are new, you are still expected to attend a defense from a prospectus, project, thesis, dissertation, and then the other thing?
An interview.
And then do one interview with an alumnus. And we've put a link to the alumni that are willing to be interviewed. And Jesse, I'm sure we continue to add to that as others are willing. And if you know somebody else that would be willing to be interviewed. But these are two very helpful projects. The students last semester absolutely loved it. And it's an opportunity for you to also gain a friend and a mentor.
New, so like
If you did it last semester, you still need to do it again, except with somebody else. Thank you. Unless you're having a baby.
out of here then.
And while they're around, anybody else have questions, comments? Who made the soup today? Ooh, what can we anticipate?
Chili.
Ooh, that sounds good. Fun. And Tanner? Heather? Okay, Dr. Larry. I actually signed up for it next week. That'll be a first for my wife and I to do soup for all of you. So I don't know if I have my input, it'll be potato soup, but sure she won't do it. So ready?
Hey, I'm ready.
You can present. We can just share the slides with the blind people.
Trying to get to our Zoom, and we welcome our Zoom students.
Send yourself the link.
Dr. Graham,
Okay.
yours.
All right. Well, I'm excited to be with you today. I'm actually hoping that my wife will show up here. She's probably having a hard time finding parking. But she shared this professional development experience with me, and she has a wonderful perspective about it too. So I'm hoping that you'll get to meet her and hear from her perspective that will maybe help you have a more balanced view of my perspective about this experience. But my kind of outline for today, what I'm hoping to do is talk a little bit about faculty professional development leaves. And of course, you're not faculty, so like, how does this relate to you? Like, how does this even matter to you? And then I'm going to share some of the experiences that we had, the academic experiences that I had in this professional development leave, both in Colombia and then doing some work in Mongolia during that time. And then I'm also going to talk about the non-academic side of it. So professional development leave has lots of different aspects, and I'll talk about some of the cultural experiences that we had. And then maybe a little bit about my learning takeaways, our learning takeaways, and extend an invitation to you. So first of all, professional development leave. BYU faculty are eligible to take a leave every 7 years. And it typically lasts for 4 to 6 months, so 1 semester. So I was on development leave last semester in the fall. And it's supposed to focus on experiences that will strengthen them in their stewardships, right? Our stewardship of teaching and research and service strengthen us in some way. And maybe in a way that's difficult or impossible to do under normal circumstances. So that was definitely the case with me, because it'd be difficult to go to Colombia for a month in the middle of the semester if I was teaching classes, right? It's also for personal and professional renewal. So renewal is something that we talk about in the college a lot. It's one of the main principles or themes that we think about in the college. And it's really important for people who are engaged in a career to renew yourself in many ways. So this is kind of the outline of what a professional development leave is. I think about it as experiential learning for faculty. We talk a lot about experiential learning, and faculty are we're constantly learning too. There's a lot of ways to do experiential learning, but a professional development leave is really a way for us to think about having an experience that magnifies our learning in a different way from our normal path. So at your tables, I want you to just talk briefly about what experiential learning opportunities outside the classroom, because I know we can do experiential learning in the classroom too, but what opportunities outside the classroom are available to you right now, okay? So
Study abroad. Although it does have the classroom. Yes.
I know, yeah, you're so
Picture, it's like, hey, we're sitting in service.
Industrial design. It's all different types of design.
Yeah, I'm in Charles. Oh, that's okay. It's a lot of people. I figured out. I came to my mind.
Our
Students. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Service, but
I was studying in Sunday school, I really tried to get started talking. Yeah.
To be toy level.
Yes, yeah.
Last Sunday we had all 4 out of 5 crying.
yeah.
okay, take 1 more minute to wrap up your discussions. Okay, what were some of the ideas that you came up with? Maybe you've had experiences already, or maybe they're just things you would like to have. What are some things that you talked about? Yeah. Having a job. Okay, a job is kind of experiential learning, but that's the kind you're going to get whether you're in our program or not, right?
One thing I love about it is I can take what I'm learning in school and immediately attempt to apply it and learn from it. And so in that way, I feel like it's a great kind of outside source, where you can apply what you're learning. It's like a little bit of a laboratory.
Good. Okay. I'll take that. And I hope all of you are doing that, but I hope you think outside of that too, right? Because oftentimes we get we can get a little bit insular in our thinking of the context that we're in. And so one of the ideas behind experiential learning is to kind of get us out, help us to see other things, right? So this is a great way to do it in your job context, but I hope you also are doing things outside of that context. Other thoughts and ideas?
We also talked about how, especially with design thinking, you can apply so many of these design principles to your everyday life. Like, for example, with like your schedule or routines, you can create different prototypes and just apply a lot of the principles. We also talked about even in relationships, if you're blending two different families together, like from two different cultures, that you can use a lot of the principles taught to be able to help you to integrate that.
Great, great. Other ideas, yeah.
We talked a little bit about the San Francisco trip that a lot of the design thinking students went on about a year ago that the paper was recently published.
Yeah. Jason, is that, are we doing it again this year or do we not have the funds this year? Oh, sorry, Jason. The department does try and sponsor some of these experiences from time to time where you can kind of get out and see. In this case, is go to San Francisco for one night, 2 days. Rick?
Interesting and ways we can speak creatively about this. I appreciate you asking the question, Charles. One thing that I've wanted to do, but I've never quite done it yet because it's complicated, of course, but there was a guy I met who does something called the Global Studio. He's out in England, but he has a design class using design thinking, and he collaborates with a class in another country, a professor in another country that's also teaching the same class at the same time, and they design things for each other's cultures. And so they get to work with students from another culture and design things for the other culture, which helps you understand that there are other cultures and our products will get used by different kinds of people. Anyway, I think there could be some things we could do, like in terms of experiential learning, where we have experiences with maybe clients, doing projects for clients, or doing things with people from other cultures.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. One more idea. Yeah.
Rebecca, sorry. Oh. Rebecca had the question about what conferences count.
Okay, so everything counts. Like, I don't care what counts and what doesn't count. Really what we're trying to think is like, what kind of experiences do you have that are outside of your norm that get you thinking differently about the world, right? And give you an experience that can kind of reset you or get you excited about a topic or give you a new perspective about a topic. So conferences can definitely do that. Conferences count. For many people, conferences are a great way to do that. Faculty, it kind of becomes the routine and is maybe, that's why we need to do something a little bit different, like a PDL. But for students, you go to a conference your first time or your second time, that can be a really experiential kind of thing, right? That kind of gets you out, lets you see a different world. So that's great. And then one more here.
Say our design, particularly you're looking for something from.
Yeah. I mean, think about your projects, your internships. I mean, all of these different experiences as potential, experiential learning things to get you out, right? So that's what, this is what a PDL does for faculty, right? Rick went, what did you do for your PDL, Rick?
I went and embedded with a technology design company in the Netherlands and actually was their instructional designer because they were a product development team making instructional products, but not really having an instructional designer with them. And I kind of worked as an instructional designer with them as they developed an own badging system for their country.
Yeah, great. And Steve, who just left, I think he worked on a book during his professional development leave. Peter went to Spain as part of his professional development leave. So, and did some work with people who were doing programming for kids in Europe while he was out there. So there are a lot of different ways you can think about these kinds of experiences. Unfortunately, in our discipline, we don't have, in our college even, we don't have a strong tradition of doing study abroads or other experiences like in the humanities and other places that get you out seeing things. But we'd like to change that, wouldn't we?
That's right.
Who is it? Oh, great. Bennett, yeah. That is awesome. We would love to see more of that kind of thing happen because it really does change your perspective. And that's one of the things that this PDL did for me was like, when I think about blended learning here in the United States, like it's a different world in other places. And to understand how to help people in other places, you have to experience it. So I want to introduce my wife, Dawn, come up. She's going to co-present with me. So Dawn, I just have to say, Dawn really pushed me to do a PDL. It is so much work. I mean, it is a lot. I mean, the benefit is high, but the work to make it happen is also really high. And so Dawn wanted to have an experiential learning experience, and so pushed me really hard to make it happen. And so she's going to help me. If you'll just stand up here, you can. I'm going to share. I told him at first I'm going to share the kind of the academic side first, and then some of the cultural learning side. But you can chip in at any time through this. Is there anything you want to say about?
Not until you start.
All right. Here are the three kind of main components of my PDL. I did a Fulbright specialist. So Fulbright's an award that you have to apply for and get through the government. That's a cultural exchange experience. So I did it with La Universidad Autónoma de Bucaramanga. Yeah. I also worked with university in Colombia that was doing a pilot project for UNESCO to try and implement and scale up blended learning in Mongolia. And I'll share a little bit about that. And then I did some early stage work on an OER book that I'm working on. Many of you know that I've done a lot of work with K-12 blended teaching and OER books there. And I'm trying to do the early work and planning for a book that we can use in higher ed. By the way, just want to say, I did this really cool thing, this cover for this book that I generated. My son-in-law taught me about some new artificial intelligence tools that are available for actually creating art. So this was created by simple me putting in text and having the AI create artwork. So I put in terms like blended learning and computer interaction. I can't remember all the terms that I used, but that's what was generated with that. Okay, so blended learning at UNAP. So this is a list. I don't expect you to this is a list of the activities that we did during a little bit less than a month, the 4 weeks that we were there. So there were, they had us running like a lot to do stuff. A lot of formal presentations and workshops over here, probably 1 to 2 a week. And then a lot of other activities that I was involved in. And actually Dawn became very involved in a lot of those activities too. The World Cafe, doing stuff with the international students at the university, teaching English, doing an on-air radio program interview for the university, and And so there are many other things, including, lunch meeting with the university president and vice president to talk about a digital transformation strategy, which they requested. All right, so I'm going to just share a couple of these things. So before I even went, so one of the challenging things with this PDL was that the Fulbright organization had some transitions, and they told me that I had the Fulbright, but didn't actually confirm till like a week before we left. So it was it was kind of stressful, and maybe 2 weeks before we left. I don't know, something like that. But
they were paying the airfare. That's all I can say.
yeah. So the airfare was really expensive because we couldn't do it until like right before. We couldn't get the flight till right before. But so I was actually supposed to go a month earlier than I went. And there was at the university, they were having a university president's digital transformation conference where they had presidents from universities from around the world come to Bucaramanga to participate in a conference about digital transformation. And so I was supposed to be there in person to do that, but because the Fulbright hadn't come through yet, I ended up doing that virtually before I actually went out and did a presentation to the university presidents that were there for the conference. I did a presentation to the College of Technology. This is another story that kind of involves Dawn. So we arrived the very first day. We were getting introduced and shown around campus. And somebody that was speaking with us mentions that they have this conference for the College of Technology the next day. And one of the keynote speakers was sick and wasn't going to come.
So I said, oh, my husband, great center.
He can do it. It was like in 2 days.
So he stayed up till like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
2 nights in a row.
Preparing a keynote presentation to fill in for somebody who didn't, but it got a lot of bonus points for us, built a lot of rapport because we were helping them to solve a problem that they had. But that one was about short programs. So like, basically we talked a lot about badges. I don't know, Rick, you remember I contacted you frantically, like you send them stuff. So, but this is kind of what happens. You do your best. I'm not an exact expert in this, but this is something that I'm familiar with, and I tapped into my network to help them with something.
That one was in English, right?
This one was in English. So they didn't have any expectation of me being able to present anything in Spanish. So when I went, we started out everything in English, and then I'll show you this next presentation. Actually, in this presentation, it was English. My confidence wasn't quite up to snuff, so we did the slides in Spanish, but I presented in English, and then somebody translated. The next one that we did was for the law school. And the law school was also one that wasn't it wasn't originally planned, but they were having, they had contacted the Adriana, who was my host, and asked her if they could, I would present to them about student engagement because most of their faculty didn't know how to use online and blended strategies or even technology very well in the classroom. And so I did this one, planning to do it. We translated into Spanish, but then when I went, I actually tried to do it in Spanish instead of English with a translator. And I did about 60 or 70% with a lot of help from people, but I think they appreciated that. And so from there on, mostly I tried to do it in Spanish, Spanglish probably, a lot of Spanish. And it's hard because I served my mission over 30 years ago, and haven't had a lot of opportunities to practice Spanish. And even if I did, the academic language is very different from, you know, I mean, vocabulary is very different. You don't learn that on your mission. You don't learn how to say blended learning or, you know, academic engagement or, you know, all of these things that we use regularly. We did focus groups on student engagement with professors that were mentor teachers, with program leaders like the graduates, like our graduate studies leaders, and then also with students. I also did a presentation for the language teaching department. This was one
Kind of volunteered.
yeah, kind of she was meeting.
Think twice before you take your significant other.
I mean, it turned out really well. Dawn we'll show some pictures later, but she jumped right in and started volunteering in the English teaching classes. And they were like, wow, somebody who's going to be here for a month who speaks fluent English and
hardly any Spanish. So the students like speak Spanish. So it was helpful for them.
Yeah. So she started to volunteer in these classes, and that's, you know, she did that radio interview and all of that kind of stuff. And as part of that, they the language department reached out to me and said, will you come do something? And of course, you know, I know a little bit about, you know, second language teaching, but kind of blended learning and online learning generally, I don't know all the pedagogies for those domains, right? Like I don't know all the pedagogies for the law domain. So I contacted a couple of our students, Jessica DeMolder and Camelia Hill, who do a lot of work in this area, and they co-presented with me to these language teachers.
So it's a very good example of blended teaching.
Yeah, we had, I was there with them face-to-face, and Jessica and Camelia were Zooming in online. Did a university faculty workshop. This was the largest venue that we had, and then we had only 120, about 120, 100 faculty. I can't remember exactly, but a whole room, kind of auditorium filled with faculty. Maybe there weren't quite that many. And this was on the topic of feedback, especially how do we use digital tools to provide greater opportunities for feedback between faculty and student, and then also at the university level. So like learning outcomes, and how do we collect and track data about learning outcomes to make sure that our programs are getting feedback from our programs to know that our students are accomplishing the things that we want them to. I also did a virtual presentation to their online teaching faculty. So we did it online. And we also did a panel talking about post-pandemic digital transformation for K-12 teachers. And one of the panelists was a principal in a local school. And so that was those were the primary kind of formal presentations and activities that I did that were planned for me. There's been one research publication that's come out of this collaboration with UNAB, started a year before the actual Fulbright site visit happened. And one of Sarah Miloma's dissertation articles that was published has actually come from our collaboration with this university. And we have another article that we're working on, a structural occasion model for institutional support for online academic engagement. That is mostly done. So that's kind of the research side. Cultural experiences. Okay, so I divided this up into a couple of categories. Before we jump into this, let me just ask, do you have any questions about kind of the academic side of things in this experience?
Question, Charles. Why Columbia? Why UNESCO? What was this for you're selecting, or, I mean, do you have to match up with what Fulbright offers as well as what you're interested in, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way it happened was about 2 years ago, right as the pandemic was starting, I was invited by another colleague in Columbia, so not at this university, to do a keynote presentation for faculty at his university and all universities in Colombia and a couple of universities in Spain. So it was a virtual keynote presentation. I did that. They did simultaneous translation and all of that kind of stuff. And a few months later, Adriana, who was our host, contacted me. And she said, I got your contact information. I was at this thing, and I just want to know if you might be able to help our university think through student engagement issues, especially as we're moving into this more digital, blended kind of world. And so my kind of approach to those kinds of things is I would love to do it if I can connect and involve students in some way, right? Because if it's something that I'm just doing alone and there's no prospect of students being involved also, it has less appeal for me. And so we got a student, a PhD student that started to work on it, and that PhD student ended up not continuing in the program. And so Sarah Tuiloma jumped on, and that's kind of how it.
Rest is history.
And the second part is that for years, I had been bugging him to take a sabbatical because how long have you been at BYU?
20 years, yeah.
And he'd never had a sabbatical. And so.
Yeah, you're supposed to do one every 7 years, but.
And so at one point when he was coming out of the dean's office, he had looked into the Fulbright opportunity. So it was already kind of a little bit fresh on his mind, but then he got made chair. So it was like, that's not going to happen. And so as soon as the prospect of him not being chair anymore was in the future, I started bothering him about it.
That's true. He's very helpful in prompting me to do.
And we don't have kids at home anymore, so I knew it was going to be a lot simpler. So that was part of it too.
Yeah.
You wrote an article for the handbook of distance education, and you talk about the importance of focusing on pedagogy first, rather than the blended learning, the physical sides of it. With your experience in Mongolia and here in Colombia, do you find that what kind of pedagogy, is that some difference, or are they more teacher-centered? What you find a distinction?
So I'm going to talk about Mongolia in just a minute. So I haven't talked about them yet. I'm going to finish with Colombia, and then I'll talk about Mongolia. But the workshops that I did were always focused on pedagogy. So I wasn't doing tools training for them. We always focused on how to use the pedagogy that matched the affordances of the tools that they have. And it was pretty easy in Colombia because their university used Canvas for their virtual courses. So, it has affordances that I'm very familiar with. It was a very different story in Mongolia because they didn't have an LMS, and they were just using Microsoft's Teams to try and make that the LMS for everything. And it's a very limited environment as an LMS. So I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But that's an awesome question. I did focus on pedagogy, but as you know, those who are taking classes from me, when you talk about media, method, and modality, method or pedagogy is what really has the strongest influence on learning. Yeah, not the modality and not the medium or the tools that you're using. Those do have an indirect influence, but it's what you do with those tools that makes the difference. A great question. All right. So the Culturally, the biggest thing to come out of this was relationships. Okay, so 3 kinds of relationships I want to talk about. Relationships with colleagues. So you can see here pictures, and Dawn was so helpful with this because it's so much easier to develop relationships outside of academia when there's 2 of you, especially when a lot of the colleagues there were female. So it was really great. You can see we had lots of experiences. This is a time where our host invited us to come to her cabin. We spent, time at their cabin, going on walks. They invited us to dinner. So is there anything, maybe you should tell about this one. Is it the rings?
Oh, so we went out to, did we go out to lunch or something before? I can't remember. But so these are all people who work. These 4 are all people who work at the university. And this is her mom. And I can't remember, we were walking home or something, and she said, I want you to meet my mom. She lives right here. So we all just went up to the apartment, and her mom loves to do things with her hands. She does painting and sculpture and artistry. And her latest thing was crocheting these little rings with little gems on them. And so she gave us all a ring as, like hostess kind of thing. And I'd never met her before. And it was just really interesting how these people pulled us into their daily lives and into their families as we worked with them. So
did most of them speak English?
Some of them. Mom didn't speak English, right, at all.
The people at the university spoke
Mostly spoke
English, at least passable English. Yeah. Okay, we also had developed relationships with church members. So we were there for 4 weeks. I just want to tell a couple of stories about this. This is us in front of the church. Looks like almost like a regular church in the United States.
Iron fence around that gets locked when everyone leaves.
The very first day we got there, we were invited to a family home evening activity. You want to tell about this, or do you want me to tell about this?
Charles's host, Adriana, knew this man right here. Hector. And he was a judge basically in Colombia, in Bucaramanga. So there are only like 2 or 3 in the whole city in Bucaramanga. So it's a very high position. And he's a member of the church. And his brother that lives with him. So when Adriana found out that we were members of the church, she's like, oh, I know this guy that's a member of your church. And he always invites all these people to his house for family home evening. It's like the weirdest thing. And she's like, but I bet he would love to have you come. So she texted him and he's like, oh yeah, send him over. So
we kind of expected her to come too, but she didn't.
So we went to that noche. And there were like 11 non-members of the church there. And the missionaries and us and he and his brother that were members. And we had a lesson that was presented by a non-member. He assigns out a conference talk to his friend. Then they come, and so we all sat in a big circle and had the lesson. And then we played a really dorky game where you had to say these things in Spanish, and I couldn't say any of it. So I was the joke of the night. Everyone thought I was hysterical. So, and then we had a little, just kind of a little snack kind of meal. That he has a cook who comes in and works for him. She comes in and makes his meals, and she loves it when he'll invite the missionaries over when they have zone conference. He'll have like 13 missionaries at his house, and his cook cooks for them, and she loves it. She says they eat everything. That's the cook right there. But we went to his house for Sunday. Twice or three of the Sundays, 2 or 3 of the Sundays.
You invite us over on Sunday after church.
Sing hymns together. Really loudly in Spanish.
He also owned a
he worked at the city building as this judge, and people come there to get married or get their marriage licenses, and they're
like the notary public kind of position.
And the people who work for him just love him because he does all these. You can look it up on YouTube. I don't remember the site, but like they get to, right before they start work, they do this dance thing together. Like they all know all the choreographed moves. So they had us do it with them one day. And every holiday they celebrate together as this work community. And this was Halloween.
And about half of his employees are
members of the church.
So it's pretty
high. Yeah.
I wanted to show you, this was Halloween here. I'm going to show you a little video. This is also Dawn, like what she added to it. So he invited us Halloween, he invited us Halloween morning to come and be the judge. This was like 7 a.m. Come be the judges of the Halloween, the costume contest for his employees. 7 a.m.
Employees were divided into groups by movies. So see if you can guess.
Let's see.
That was grocery shopping. They're like, come do it with us. I have no idea what I'm doing.
So let's see if we can play.
This is the thing they do every morning. Hector Gandalf.
I wasn't brave enough to get out and dance with them. I am too insecure in my own skin.
Has to hold the camera.
The judges were like other people in government, like that he knows, you know. There were like 6 of them.
To our department, Charles.
What's the judge?
We were the judges too.
We were the judges with some other,
Your friend.
That's Victor. No, he organized it.
He did not dress up.
he was the MC.
Okay.
He was the one who dressed up as Gandalf in that white.
Yeah, that was him.
We also, let's see. Okay, another thing that I just wanted to say is this, I felt like this was great for strengthening relationship with spouse. We spent a lot of time together. He couldn't speak Spanish, so it was dependent on me, which is not normally the case.
I can understand a lot of Spanish because I speak French pretty fluently, and I took a year of college Spanish. So, but I was too afraid to try and talk Spanish very much. I could say the basic stuff, but
we did a lot of stuff together. We went to salsa concert. We visited a lot of places on the weekends and in the evenings. And I felt like it was just a really great, it was a short time, it was about a month, but it was a time when we kind of got to refresh and renew our relationship too, which was really fun. Here's some pictures of Dawn helping in the English class. So working with nursing students.
This is at the cafe. They called it World Cafe. It's just anybody who wants to be in the International Students Club. And you didn't have to be an international student, but if you just wanted to come and speak English and meet people from other places. And then they would always have they called it cafe, and they would always have one little treat or empanadas or something at the end. That was really fun.
This is the lady that
I worked with her every week, and we went and did stuff together, like shopping. And
this was Halloween. This was Halloween day, and these are the guards for the
school. It's a private university, so you had to check in at the gate. And this nursing class,
you had to check in at the gate for the PE facilities. So
Yeah.
that's where this was. It was like the gym facility. So we have the same thing here. You don't have to check in with regards for
the other campuses. But this nursing class, the teacher, she's married to someone from the United States. And when she heard we were here, it was really close to the end of the semester there. And she had all of her students do their final English project. And I had to like grade their projects. So they had to do an alternative medicine, explain an alternative medicine in English. And it was really fun because they had to have an activity as part of their project. So I did yoga, we did massage, we did aromatics. So it was really fun. I myself really enjoyed seeing different teachers' ways of teaching and being involved with the students. And a lot of them really don't like their English classes because they feel like they're never going to be able to leave Columbia. Why should they have to learn English? And so I think it was really fun, uplifting, and inspiring for them to have someone come in and say, when you learn English, it's going to open doors for you and you'll have experiences you're not planning on right now that will be available to you. It was really fun.
We end at 10:02. Is that right, Scott? Yeah. Okay. So there were a bunch of cultural activities we did, doing the salsa dances.
But you have to tell them your favorite treat. Marico mango.
Marico mango was like they chopped a passion fruit open, scooped out the inside.
They just kind of scoop it so that it's loose.
They put ice cream in it. And eat it. So good. So good. We did a lot of cultural things. This is our our taxi driver. Our taxi driver would take us on weekends to go do stuff. And we went to one, they didn't let us go very far. The Fulbright wouldn't let us go very far. But we went on this one trip that was about 3 hours away. And so the taxi driver is going to be with us the whole day on Saturday. And we had kind of built a relationship with him, talked with him. And I was feeling kind of bad because he didn't like, he was working like 12, 13 hours a day. And I said, well, where's your daughter going to be on that day? And he said, well, she's going to be at home. My wife works on Saturdays, the first half of the day. And I said, why don't you invite your daughter to come with us? There's an extra seat in the car. We're going to this park, this national park. Bring her and we'll pay the entrance fee. And so you can just come. And so he brought his daughter. You can see his little daughter there. And we ate, we went to the park together. It was a lot of fun.
We paid how much he would make in a whole day is what we paid to have him take us. And it was nothing for us, right? And especially because the dollar right now is really high compared to and so for us, it was like.
For us, it wasn't that big of a sacrifice, but for him to actually take off a day or to pay for his daughter to go,
his daughter had never been there. He'd only been there once to the place we went.
It was really fun because we went to this Panachi, this place where it's like their Grand Canyon. But they have these trams that go across with glass on the side.
They just go down the side and then they go through a little thing and then they go back up the other side.
And her little daughter had never been on something like that before. So she was a little scared at first. And then when she got in and we went down and we were going down, she just had these squeals of delight. So it's funner than being at the place itself, was just watching her just delight in this experience. So it was really fun. All right, so here is the thing. The time is up. I'm going to have soup. There were some really cool things that happened with Mongolia too. And that's kind of an ongoing relationship project. So the first part of that went so fast and was so chaotic. It happened all in that semester. They contacted me at the beginning of the semester. most of the meetings I was doing with them and the workshops and trainings were at like 10 o'clock at night because of the time zone issues. I would love to share that with you sometime, but we don't have time today. But I also am hoping that opportunity that I did in Mongolia kind of, they reached out to me to help with that it will turn into some opportunities in the future for research that students can be involved in. And I know Ruth already is, interested in some of the international blended stuff and working with UNESCO. So, but I'm hopeful that this will be something that's useful.
So I just want to say one thing, because a lot of you are in academia and it's busy and it's a lot of work. And I see just from the spouse side, but we were in graduate school when I had my 5th child. So I know what it's like to, to do this, but also it has been so amazing and wonderful for him to take a break. It wasn't really a break for him at all. Like he was working just as hard as he works here. Most of the time we were in Columbia, except for the weekends that were really fun for us. But I just want you to tell you that it really does improve and increase your ability to do what you do when you have opportunities to kind of go outside your norm. And I would just encourage you to kind of keep that in your minds as you plan for your future. And it was crazy that it took us so long. But I'm just really grateful to him for being willing to do it. And now he's just always telling people to do it, even our own kids. So I'm just really grateful for that. And you can just have such an impact in so many ways just because of who you are and the skills you have. And it's not always just your academic skills. So.
Wow. So privileged to have Dr. Graham and Dawn from IP&T. You really are. We owe so much to you, Charles. And Nathan, will you be willing to offer a blessing on our student?